What is the first night in prison like? Are children ever sexually abused in prison systems? Is there torture in juvenile prisons? In the new episode of Can't Ask, we are with Yunus Malaolu. Yunus is a juvenile prisoner. Welcome, Yunus.
Thank you.
Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. My name is Yunus. My surname is Malaolu. I'm currently working in the farmer's market. I'm 26 years old.
Why did you go to prison?
I was imprisoned for the crimes of deprivation of liberty and aggravated robbery in 2007. 1 year after the incident, 1 year after the victim filed a complaint, I was caught. I was sitting in a park in Umrania. I was sitting with my girlfriend. My other accomplice, my accomplice in the incident, was having an argument with his friend. I also witnessed the incident. I went to them. It turned out that he was extorting his own friend. Of course, I deeply resented this incident. I said, "Why are you mugging this man?" He said things like, he swore at me and things like that. I couldn't hold myself back. Driven by the ambition that came with youth at the time, I stabbed him. Then the incident also included extortion. I did not commit extortion. Since extortion is a more serious crime, I was sentenced to 11 years and 8 months. I was in prison for 4 years, 10 months, and 11 days. During this trial process, my friend could not get over the injustice he had done against me. Later, after I was released from prison, he offered me money, like blood money, and I did not accept it. The child who was victimized in the incident also wanted to talk to me in order to apologize. I did not accept that either. I had been wronged. I could not accept it. That's how it happened.
How did you feel when you first went to prison as a child?
I was just a kid, you know? You come into a world that you have never known in your life, that you have never wanted to encounter in your life. My first time in prison was actually quite tragicomic. I had a broken collarbone. I entered the prison with a bandage with one side crooked and wobbling. When the soldiers were pounding on the gate of Bayrampaşa prison, I felt something in that intense atmosphere. You know how when a person dies after death, his head touches the headstone and you feel that he is dead? At that moment, I visualized all the bad things that could happen to me or that I would experience in the future. Where am I going? What is happening to me? I started asking these questions in my head. Then, I was taken to prison. Suddenly, I woke up in a cell. The first prisoners who arrive are kept in a cell. You stay in the cell with the condition that there are 7 or 8 people in the cell. When you stay in this cell, a certain period of time has to pass before you can move to the wards where there are more prisoners. This is a period of 10 days. I stayed in solitary confinement for 10 days. Then I was transferred to a very famous ward in Bayrampaşa called A4. As I was being handed over at the gate, the guard said to me, "You're entering a place where there's an entrance, but no exit." I was very impressed. The door opened. I was delivered inside. I looked at the face of the prisoner who would welcome me inside. He looked quite numb to me, as if someone stripped him of his soul and his feelings. He created such a strange perception in me. It was really extraordinary. He told me to go inside, so I went. I had my bag in my hand. There were my clothes, the tracksuit my mother had brought, slippers. There were clothes like these. I was handed over. That's how I entered. I will never forget the way I entered. I will never get it out of my mind.
How was the first night in prison like?
On my first night, of course, after a nice torture, after the welcome beating, I put my head on the pillow. They made me take a bath. They beat me before the shower. The place was known for its infamous hose beatings. This system of being beaten with a hose is famous in Bayrampaşa juvenile prison. I have never been beaten like that in my life. When I say such a beating, I don't mean a beating in a normal fight. I was beaten by 21 people, a child with a broken collarbone, composted, so to speak, by 21 people. When I went to bed, I asked myself this question. I wondered if I ended up here as part of a purpose set by the God, or if there was another reason. I questioned myself about why I came to this place. Anyway, they wake you up at 9 o'clock in the morning, whether you have visitors or not. Officers, assistants, prisoners, everyone gets up. If you need to use the bathroom or something else, you're not allowed to get out of bed during that time. Night supervisors used to wait at the door of the officers, just in case you could harm them at night. Because when is a person most vulnerable to being caught? In bed. And they kept that night supervisor in charge to prevent him from doing that. There were children, driven to crime and used by society. I saw these children a lot at night. There were many cases. Due to the excessive beatings, there were cases of bedwetting, following that, spinal damage, and later, children who lost their physical or cognitive ability to speak. When they woke up in the morning, psychologically, the key rule there was the phrase, "Don't get me wrong," at the end of whatever they said. You have to use the phrase, "Don't get me wrong," at the end of every word. And when that child goes to bed at night, he lies down without imagining or feeling anything about what he will experience the next morning. To understand their psychology, you have to be like them. You have to be dragged into crime. They were using a lot of children. They were sacrificing many children for their own ambitions. What kind of life will those children have going forward? How will they be able to continue with their lives? This is one of the questions that society should ask.
Are there a lot of orphans in juvenile prisons?
These orphaned children can generally be used more easily in crimes, because a child without a mother or father has no one to care for or look after them, and the leaders of such organized crime organizations usually choose such children and use them in crimes. Depending on the occupancy rate, it is certain that 70% or 60% of orphaned children are in prison. These children are being sacrificed to society. They are almost torn to shreds by society, so to speak. Can you understand the story of a child who doesn't have anyone? Everyone's name is read out at visiting hours and his name is not read out. Of course, some psychologists or good friends can motivate him. But how much can you motivate him? Your parents are here. You are dressed in a suit. You are going to the visitation corridor proudly. When he sees the other person coming through the door after the visit, that child experiences the most difficult moment of his life. So orphanhood is really bad. Orphaned children, they are torn to pieces in prison.
What does a juvenile prisoner go through when he gets out of prison?
When a juvenile inmate is released from prison, the current efforts of our government to provide vocational training and reintegrate them into society are in a very poor state. Rather than discovering the child's abilities and helping them thrive in what they're good at, they make things harder through bureaucratic paperwork and poor communication. I think children who are released from juvenile prison should be directly enrolled in vocational training courses. They are looking for certain qualifications for these. You can benefit from these if you have completed your sentence completely and got out. But even without a conviction, you know the current judicial system. There are children who serve almost 3.5 to 4 years and are acquitted. They are not eligible for the convict employment quota, and so they remain unemployed. Some kids in prison end up strengthening their criminal mindset by connecting with others who committed similar crimes, and they begin to plan even worse things for when they're released. This is actually one of the deepest wounds of society. In other words, instead of improving the child who is released from prison in their personal life, you send them back to prison again. This is a very serious situation. That's why nothing changes sociologically and structurally after they are released from prison. It goes backwards.
How is the education system in prisons?
Education in prison is like this. When you first enter, they ask about your job, your education, and what you might be able to do in terms of education or profession. During this time, if you are a school dropout, they enroll you in distance learning. I looked into it myself. I was in 4th grade when I dropped out, and I had actually received honors back then. After receiving honors, I started thinking about continuing my education again in prison. I wrote a petition. After I sent it, they responded to my petition. They enrolled me in distance learning. Then, I graduated from middle school in prison through distance learning. After that, I studied high school again. I finished high school. I'm currently trying to finish university again through distance learning. God willing, I will finish. They put kids who are willing to respond to education into educational programs. But those with a less favorable profile are subjected to harsher conditions. They are mistreated. The administration wants to make use of the potential they see in the individual. They don't worry about winning the lost child. Actually, you have already won me. The important thing is to win him. What kind of benefit will that person bring to society in the future? Think about what they took away from that child. A 15-year-old child, a 14-year-old child. I mean, what can that child do? You have to determine what he can do. You have to educate him. This is how education is. Similarly, there are courses. For example, let's say there is a painting course. Then there is a theater course. There is an English course. Of course. These courses are meant to be attended by certain prisoners, selected by the administration with certain rules. Prisoners with a bad profile are not allowed to participate in such things. I tried to help many of my fellow prisoners to attend these kinds of courses. I tried to bring them back to life. I tried to encourage them to read books, but the administration did not help me. I even wrote a petition to the Ministry of Justice, saying that a library could be built, that the children here could benefit from the books. I took part in a few educational projects.
What is the youngest age at which a child can be convicted?
At 11 years old, one is not criminally responsible. He needs to be 12. At the age of 12, when he commits a crime, he can be tried. They are put in juvenile prisons like ours. Even in my own period, I had a fellow prisoner who committed a double murder at the age of 13. During the trial process, of course I was 15 years old. I was a little older than him, so I gave him psychological support. He was getting out of bed every day, every night. He was jumping out of bed every day, every night, wetting his pants. It was a really intense situation. I supported him psychologically as much as I could. At the age of 12-13, he was sentenced to 24 years in prison. After he was sentenced, he came and I talked to him in the ward. How can a 13-year-old child be sentenced to 24 years in prison? And what could I say to him? Nothing. Nothing I told him would convince him. I knew that. I tried to explain to him that at least this situation could be good for his future life, that he could turn this sentence into an opportunity. I had encountered such a situation like this.
Are children sexually abused in juvenile prisons?
Since children are usually categorized according to crimes, prisoners who commit such crimes, such as sexual abuse, blackmail, rape, stay in one place. Since they commit such crimes among themselves, such incidents can happen. But in our own ward system, in wards where crimes such as extortion and murder are separated, you don't often encounter such situations. I have a story like that. We had a friend in our ward who was not doing well both physically and mentally. The officer was having this guy do his own tasks. He made him wash his clothes. In addition, he made him wash, fold, and stack his clothes in the closet and so on. He tortured him. He also physically harmed him. I became suspicious. I couldn't bring myself to believe that he would do such things. Then one day, around 10:30 or 11, I walked past the dormitories. I heard a noise. Then I opened the door. I witnessed it myself. At that moment, he was committing sexual assault and I couldn't stand it. I attacked both of them at once. I couldn't hold back. I just dived in, let me put it that way. We handed the officer over to the administration together. After that, they took him from the ward. They opened a separate investigation against him. I was in solitary confinement for 20 days for being involved in a crime. Then I wrote a petition to the prison prosecutor through my own court. The prosecutor came. I told him what happened. They immediately took me out of the cell. After that, they removed all the prison directors, guards basically, all the current correctional officers from there. Of course, as well as witnessing such crimes, they also tell us about many rapes in Adana Pozanta prison, Izmir Bergama Juvenile Prison, Maltepe Juvenile Prison for various reasons, because it had become very institutionalized. It was a very well-known thing. These things happen. Anyone who says that there are no incidents of abuse, who says that they have not witnessed one or heard about it, is lying.
How did your family support you?
My family, they did not actually support me while I was in prison. They did not come to visits. Only my mother came. My mother's financial situation wasn't good either. She used to pay me a very small amount of money on a regular basis. I know that I used to sustain myself with only 10 liras per week. Because my mother was orphaned, there wasn't really anything she could bring me with her. I had great economic difficulties. That's why I had a difficult time in prison. They never supported me, but their perspective changed a lot after I got out.
What was the first thing you did when you got out?
When I got out, I had a boss from Trabzon in Umrania. He was a brother whom I loved very much, and who came from a really decent family. I had worked for him for a year or two when I was a kid. He had a textile company. I was working for him. I went straight to him. He said something like, "Get well soon," or something like that. Of course, I had no money in my pocket. I really had nothing. He gave me some money, and I'm really thankful to him. After that, he told me what to do about my life from now on. I spent a day with him. I felt very strange. I mean, imagine you are in prison for 4 years, 10 months, 11 days. In prison, you think about such things. I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. You have a lot of time to think there. But after you get out, you face the realities of society because you have no economic structure. Electricity bills, water bills, eating and drinking. Thanks to him, he supported me in these matters in order to pave the way for me. It was difficult. It had a great impact. I mean, I had great difficulties. I was like a fish out of water. It is very difficult to get used to that active life, to that chaos, to daily activities.
What does the concept of punishment and justice mean to you?
I think the real punishment is staying in the same place with a stranger you've never met before. Someone rejected by society, pushed to its lowest rung, a hardened criminal. Communicating with him, along with the prison's imposed rules and regime, is itself a punishment, because you are staying in a place with a person you don't know at all. His clothes stink, his body stinks. He doesn't take care of himself, doesn't clean himself, doesn't fulfill his own needs. It is a punishment to stay with them. Communicating with them and trying to reintegrate into life is a punishment. Following the prison's rules is a punishment. Otherwise, you might as well give a cow its feed and have it stay in a room. According to my understanding of justice, instead of sending children with that kind of profile directly to prison, I think their crimes could be addressed through educational and rehabilitative programs conducted in controlled, prison-like environments. I think putting children in prison is not the solution. Winning them back, or wanting to win them back, is actually the solution.
What pushes children to crime?
I think this issue is completely related to the environment of the child. Children who are not properly educated by their own families and parents usually grow up with such a wannabe mentality. I think that they are influenced by such movies and series, because if these things don't encourage them, where will they see and commit such crimes? You can't do something you haven't seen. I mean, in this way, children grow up with wannabe mentality. It's like smoking cigarettes, so you aspire to crime. You can face a crime that you have never seen, and you can be tried for that crime and go to prison. I think that children need to be properly and thoroughly educated in order to prevent such things from happening. They need to have a strong and supportive family background. How they will be included in society and what they can do afterward are issues that the state needs to address.
Are there differences between the crimes committed by girls and crimes committed by boys?
Girls often tend to fall in love with boys who show signs of criminal potential. those involved in gangs or similar dynamics. They use drugs in these kinds of environments. When they commit a crime together, the treatment that women receive is much less severe when compared to men. For example, they can hide drugs or money on women more easily due to less suspicion being placed on them and communicate with them more freely. They can use women in these crimes as intermediaries in order to reach another male victim. Typically, female offenders are more likely to be involved in crimes such as theft, fraud, and personal offenses compared to their male counterparts. In the case of men, offenses are generally theft, assault, and homicide. Although the types of crimes mostly differ, accomplices often include women committing the same offense. They are also used in such cases. Therefore, it's often quite easy for a man to persuade a woman and get her to fall in love with him, so it is done under the assumption that it is so. In my opinion, the variations in their crimes are largely connected to the situation society has forced them into. Prostitution tends to be more common among females. It is necessary to question the system itself that creates the conditions for prostitution, whether it is forced or how it is done. There is not much difference between them. It's almost negligible.
Have you ever tried to escape?
I never thought of such a thing. There aren't physical conditions that would necessitate escape. However, sometimes we come across fellow prisoners who, after being treated in the hospital, escape upon discharge. After they escape, when they are caught, they are executed again for the same crimes. They cannot benefit from any rights whatsoever from that point onward. There are those who want to escape. I even have a story like this. One day when we were playing volleyball in the garden, our ball accidentally got on the roof. Of course, because I was the tallest among them, my friends prepared a chair or something for me. I was about to go out, get the ball, but then I stepped back. There was a warning shot fired, so I immediately stepped back. I immediately went down. It's a very bad memory. So we left the ball and everything. Then we asked the administration. Then they told us that it was not right to do such a thing. Such a situation happened.
Are there any cases where child prisoners take on what their parents did?
There are. Even if it doesn't happen in our own prisons, it's quite common in rural prisons across Anatolia. There are people who used to write letters to each other, who became friends, and who had previously been in such prisons before coming to ours, and they're the ones telling these stories. For example, the father kills the uncle. The son takes the blame in order to get a lesser sentence. Then they take care of the son. They cover everything themselves, including his education, financial needs, everything. This is a very bad situation. I think the father should get double the punishment in such cases. Because you are playing with a child's life. You're putting the crime of murder on a child who doesn't have the potential to commit murder. Such things can happen. There are also children who have committed someone else's crime or committed their own crime outside and then took the crime of their friend on themselves. Their needs are met in prison. And there are children who accept this.
How do juvenile prisoners integrate into life when they leave prison?
There is a punishment phase for juvenile prisoners. First, you stay in a closed prison. Of course, you need to have a good profile in order to deserve an open prison. With 1 year left, you go to open prisons. In these open prisons, there are tasks for integration, for example, to communicate with the outside. There are external tasks. They can work in the courthouse. Outside the courthouse, they can work in normal military areas. For example, I worked at the Beykoz Force Command in Istanbul. They work in areas like cleaning, unloading, painting, or polishing, the same tasks done by the regular soldiers there. And this helps them reintegrate into society. Long-term prisoners benefit from these. Then after you are released from prison, if you have acquired a profession there, you can continue in that line of work. Of course, under very difficult conditions. That is a separate issue. There are reintegration processes like this, but I think they aren't very effective.
Is it easy to find a job after leaving prison?
It is very difficult to find a job when you get out of prison. If you have not finished your sentence in prison, you cannot get out as a convict. For example, let's say you were tried in a case. You were not sentenced during this trial process. You served 3 to 4 years, you were acquitted. You are not convicted. You become a convict after you have served your entire sentence. After you are released, the Ministry of Justice has a jurisprudence reserved for convicts. Those who can read and write can be placed in certain departments. These processes typically involve specific petitions and discussions, but they're often handled with pressure and from a different point of view. Currently, every company has to employ someone with a criminal record. Currently, that law has been flexibilized. There are many companies that don't even employ them. Where will the man find a job? The man was in prison for 5 years. He comes out of prison and doesn't have a penny in his pocket. No job, no skills. He has no profession. Gradually, you lose everything. You move towards poverty. The process after prison is heavier. At least the prison doesn't take money from anyone. I mean, your electricity and water bills are paid, and there's no one depending on you or waiting for you to fulfill any responsibilities. So the process after you leave prison is heavier. You go questioning your past. You leave looking back. It's more different.
How old are you feeling at the moment?
My real age now is 27. I was always interested in sports during my imprisonment. We had a fellow imprisoner who was actually an engineer by profession. We made sports equipment with our own means. In general, I always did sports, so I didn't wear myself out there because I did sports. I didn't let it wear me down. I feel like I'm 20, 21 years old now because I haven't experienced anything. I mean, the friendships I had during my youth, the kind of relationships formed in high school, the teacher-student dynamics, and later, the relationships developed in institutional settings. So I feel young because I have not experienced any of them. So, I think I have a lot to live. I think I need to live more. The age I am feeling right now is 2021.
Are there cases of torture in juvenile prisons?
There are various kinds of torture that you cannot hear anywhere else in your life. You cannot believe it when you hear it. There is absolutely no question whether it exists or not. For example, the first ones to enter a juvenile prison are usually children whom no one has ever greeted or met. And a team is formed by 20 people. In order for these teams to correct the behavior of the child in prison or to adapt to the environment there according to their own rules, they are beaten until they bleed from mouth to nose, until their bones are broken. And one of Bayram Pasha's biggest torture tactics is to torture them naked with a cold plastic hose. That is, by cutting the hose that connects to the toilet or sink. Once you're out of this phase, they use psychological tricks to keep you from interacting with other inmates for around 20 days, or from reporting it to the authorities. You're entitled to 2 loaves of bread, for instance. Prisoners usually eat a loaf of bread so that they don't go hungry in the evening. Since everything we ate was limited, in the evenings, for example, the officer in charge would go around the wards. He would ask if there was extra bread. You don't want to give that bread. But when you don't give that bread, they would narrow your comfort zone. You know, they used various tortures. I know I was beaten 24 hours a day for this issue. Just because I wouldn't give up my bread. I didn't feel like it. And we had to use that word. They had to hear the word, "Don't get me wrong." And I was beaten many times for not saying that. In fact, I remember one day I was so hungry that I almost fainted. I know I ate the breadcrumbs left at the bottom of the bag with a spoon. Later on, I know that inmates without resources are only assigned to jobs like cleaning toilets, while those who have money get placed in better areas and more comfortable wards. So, the power of money continues everywhere. Money is everywhere. There are situations like this. In addition, a prisoner should not lie in order to survive there. because the prisoner doesn't like lying. When you lie, as soon as he realizes that you are lying, he stops talking to you and you have to move from that ward to another. They don't like prisoners coming from another ward because they know that he is disorderly in another place, that he is ostracized there. If you want to go to another ward, you cannot. Your conditions will become more difficult and your sentence will increase. Therefore, you have to obey those rules and regulations. You have to get tortured. I want all the people watching this video to understand that it's possible to come back to life from those kinds of places somehow, to get out of prison and reintegrate into society. Because when you have already lost something in your life, you cannot bring it back. At the very least, we need to find ways to transform our losses into something positive. That's what I did. I can honestly say that. May God not grant my enemy a life like the one I have lived. Let no tears fall from the eyes of any child. Children should not be oppressed. May the children in prisons enduring torture not turn their future lives into a prison of their own making. Because when you raise a child like that at that age, as they grow up, they tend to lean toward crime. Their ways of communication become very harsh and hard to understand. We should prevent such losses. We have to reintegrate them into society somehow.